right, in recent years, there's been a lot of discussion about workplace relations and regulations, particularly as far as sexual harassment and bullying are concerned. Let's catch up with the latest and how perhaps employers are having to negotiate this. Geordie Poor joining us from People and Cultural Strategies. Geordie, very good morning to you. So, this is always very tricky, isn't it, at the workplace to deal with allegations, of course, of sexual harassment, but just as tricky for the employer to deal with it. And now, of course, the laws seem to be changing state by state at the same time.
Yeah, it's an area which has come into even more prominence than has always been the case. It's always a very sensitive matter. It's always very complex, whether you're an employee who's had allegations made against them, if you're the individual who's making the complaint, and as you quite rightly say, Andrew, the employers who often find themselves in the middle of it, but are the ones who are often the most exposed, because these are all things that are alleged to be happening on their watch. And what's really happened in the last couple of years is that, largely triggered by Me Too and a number of very high-profile cases involving high-profile individuals in a whole range of industries, there's been a lot more inquiry into whether the laws that actually exist and have existed in this space for the better part of the last 30, 40 years, and notwithstanding the activity and claims that are brought under that legal framework, whether they've actually been sufficient. And one of the things that has been the focus of a lot of these inquiries and reports is whether, firstly, whether the level of education in relation to these things is adequate, and fairly universally it's been found that most employers and in most organisations there's a bit of a tick a box approach in relation to this, and they're not actually meaningfully trying to educate. Taking it a couple of steps further, there's been a lot of criticism of employers and organisations who do deals with people who have been found to have engaged in inappropriate behaviours, and as part of that, there might be non-disclosure agreements that are entered into, and deeds preventing disclosure and commentary in relation to any of the allegations. And so this notion that employers are paying off people who are bringing complaints, and even if they're taking action against individuals, all of that's being done in secrecy. That has been something that's been extensively criticised, and so we're on the brink of a system or framework whereby those mechanisms whereby a lot of these matters have been dealt with are probably going to be thrown out the window.
So let's look at an example. Of course, the mining industry, traditionally it's male dominated. So, anecdotally at least, we hear many stories of women in that sector having to deal with issues of sexual harassment. The WA government is actually making moves in that regard. What's it doing?
Yeah, so they've just released a report, a parliamentary inquiry of sorts, where one of the recommendations, and very consistent with some of these themes that I was just talking to, where education needs to be better, there needs to be far greater responsiveness. As an industry, they need to get better at regulating this. So shifting this from it's an individual employer responsibility to, no, we need to understand that in this particular industry, particularly in that state, we have a big problem. And one of the things that's come out of this report, one of the recommendations that's being made, which, look, you can understand where it's coming from, but certainly it's controversial, is the idea and the recommendation that there be a central register maintained of individuals who have been found by their employer to have engaged in sexual harassment. So effectively an offender register. Which would then be accessible to other employers in the industry. Now, that would be a very significant move if that was something that was legislated and mandated as far as employers in that particular industry are concerned. I don't necessarily think that is a solution. It's an area that is fraught with difficulty. There remain a number of complaints that are made that, when investigated, are found to be unsubstantiated. There are a number of complaints that are found to be vexatious. Goes without saying, there are a significant number of complaints that are substantiated and are valid, but it's an area where governments have to tread very carefully. And But what I'd say to employers is you've just got to be very mindful that this is a highly developing space, and what you might have thought has got you there to now is certainly not going to get you there in the future.